I'm just gonna pause the name, introduce. Yeah, thank you.
Yep.
So,
Vanessa Long, Planning Commission.
Lisa Chase, citizen.
Mary Tomford, Planning Commission.
Bill Bannister, Planning Commission.
Dan Toomey, want to introduce yourself?
Dan Toomey, Wyndham Regional Commission Commissioner for Putney.
Great, thank you. Welcome, Dan. Karen?
This is Doug Grant. I'm on the zoning bylaws advisory committee.
Thank you. Karen? Oh, you're muted.
Karen Ashley, Town Manager.
Thank you. Peter?
Peter Podgy, Zoning Bylaw Modernization Committee member.
Great, thank you. We have several committee members here tonight. Terrific. I'm going to do just a quick review of the agenda, but one of the things not on the agenda that I wanted to give space for is to allow Dan to introduce himself. He's recently become a commissioner on behalf of Putney at the Wyndham Regional Commission, and thought he would tell us a little bit about what he's doing and get to know us. And he wanted to listen to this meeting tonight. So I'll go over the agenda, and Dan, then I'll give you a chance to say hello. We have several meeting minutes to approve tonight, and we will do that for September 30th, the 7th of October, and the 14th of October, which says we've been meeting a lot. So we'll take time to do that. Review our action items from the past, and some updates there. We have a status report from Vanessa on the Comprehensive Village Plan project. I think Pip will help us do an update on the Putney Landing sidewalk project. The zoning bylaw modernization will be the biggest part of our time tonight, and we have several items there that we will spend time on. We will talk a little bit about the schedule the next few months, and the Planning Commission budget development that I'm working on right now. And there'll be a chance for wrap up, next steps, and leaving by 8:30. If we're done earlier, we will do that. Last time we met, we were able to end a little bit earlier because we finished our business. Any other comments on the agenda before I invite Dan? Hearing none, then welcome, Dan.
Thank you.
Please tell us about your.
Hi, everyone. I was appointed to the Wyndham Regional Commission by the Putney Select Board in April, and I've attended 3 commission meetings thus far. The last being a general meet and greet that we had at the Union Hall in Newfane last Tuesday. It was a meeting in which the employees of the commission introduced themselves and talked about what each of them each talked about what it was that they specialized in, what it was that they did. And following that, the commissioners from the different towns introduced themselves. So I think toward the end of the meeting, the executive director made a call for commissioners joining committees, which I had not done yet because I felt it best for me to get a general overview of what the commission is responsible for. And I've learned that it's responsible for just about everything. Anyway, the executive director suggested that any new commissioners, and I'm being by far the newest in the commission, join the finance committee, because the finance committee is a good way to get a comprehensive overview of what it is that the commission does, and see how money is allocated and money is accrued and so forth. And she also said, there is an opening on the Brownfields Committee, which, as it happens, she's the, committee chair of. So this, anyway, so those looked appealing to me. I ran into Susan in the foyer to the Putney Co-op on Friday morning, I believe, and I mentioned to her both these committees, and she thought the Brownfields Committee sounded like a really good idea, in particular because of our the challenges perhaps that we may have with the shutting down or decommissioning or whatever we call it with the paper mill. This morning I sent in my request to the executive director that I be appointed to those two committees. The executive committee has to approve her nominations, and I think I'll hear back sometime later this week, probably. So I think that's about it right now. I'm in the very early learning stages about what it is that we do, but I'm intrigued and excited by the work that and look forward to it. That's it.
Well, thank you very much, Dan, for joining us and sharing what you're working on. And I think there will be definitely opportunities between Planning Commission work and what you're doing with the Wyndham Regional Commission where we
Right.
could collaborate. And there's a couple of things that we might even talk about this evening that overlap with Wyndham Regional Commission's work, like their land use plan they're developing right now.
Good.
Karen?
So I just want to thank Dan for stepping up and volunteering as a representative of Putney, because I had done it for several years on the Transportation Committee. And yes, it is very important work and we need more volunteers, but I thank you very much, Dan, for, putting yourself out there.
You're welcome.
Good. I now want to welcome to the meeting to a couple of other folks who have joined us. Jim Oliver has joined us.
Hello,
Hello, good.
can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Hey, Jim.
Hello.
Great. And also Ann Carey has joined us. Welcome, Ann. Thank you. Yeah, good to have you here with us. Okay. Good. Well, I would then, unless there's any other discussion about welcoming Dan and working with the Wyndham Regional Commission in his role, I'll move on to our approving minutes from 3 meetings that are in your packet. And 2 of the minutes are from special meetings that we had for the zoning bylaw project. They're community meetings. Hang on a second, I'm just getting a note here from Andrew about whether he will join us. Okay, Andrew's not able to join us this evening, so. So we have 3 sets of meetings, 2 of them from these public meetings, and the other one is from, so that's the September 30th and the October 14th. And then the other set is from our monthly meeting on October 7th. I will be looking for motions to approve all of these minutes. I just want to point out, in looking at them, we've done some thoughtful work on the minutes to try to make sure we captured the sense of the meetings, the community meetings, the comments that people had. A lot of it was about the forest block issue. And we took some time to be able to record that. And I will thank members of the Planning Commission who helped develop the notes from the meeting on October 14th. I think that will be a very useful document as we move that project forward to stage 2. So I guess we should take these individually. I would entertain a motion to approve the minutes from September 30th.
Motion to approve the minutes from September 30th.
Thank you, and seconded. Mary, thank you. Any comments on the minutes from September 30th? Hearing none. All in favor of approving the minutes as submitted? All in favor? Aye. It's Mary too, okay. That's unanimous. And then the next one is our monthly meeting, October 7th. A motion to approve the minutes from October 7th.
Motion to approve the minutes for October 7th.
Thank you, Vanessa. And a second to approve the minutes?
I will abstain.
Yeah, because you weren't there. That's right. That
No,
was,
second.
thank you. Thank you, Pip. Any comments on the minutes? Hearing none, all in favor to approve the minutes? Okay, unanimous. And the last set then is the minutes from October 14th. And those do have an attachment to them that capture the feedback we received from the small group discussion. So it has the meeting minutes and then that summary of the feedback. A motion to approve the minutes from October 14th. Thank you, Pip. A second,
Second.
and
I abstain.
any comments on the meeting minutes?
I just want to comment that I found the attachment very helpful in terms of thinking about next steps from that meeting and information to help guide the research plan and kind of project action. Yeah, so.
Thank you for that, Vanessa. And in
Yeah.
fact, I do plan to use that when we talk about stage 2 tonight, and when I come back and look at these comments. And there are also some from the September meeting to with that. Thank you. Did we approve them?
No.
Yeah. Okay, all in favor? Unanimous? Thank you. Okay. One of those minutes for tonight. And Mary, are you able to do some minutes of you taking minutes? Right, right. And we have our recording on as well. Correct. All right, we have a document, the one that's a little colorful, that is the action item status report. This is a way of keeping track of things. And I will just review it briefly. On actions from both the October 7th and 14th meeting, number 1 was about getting ready for community meeting number 3. We did all those things and we had a very productive meeting, I thought. So thank you to everybody who helped prepare for that meeting and hold the discussion groups, and quite helpful. And then work on what we call stage 1 of the zoning bylaw project, which is updates to the zoning bylaws, not with the forest block. That's stage 2. Those things are underway. We will spend time in today's meeting going over where we are, and some very good progress in the last couple of weeks. So we'll talk about that. Stage 2, we'll talk more about that when we get to zoning. But we do need to look at our schedule and how we're going to follow up. And so the follow-up items here relate to what we need to do. And we'll come back and talk about those when we get to that part of the agenda. I did do my monthly planning commission chair report for October. You'll see that in your meeting packet. And on item 6, recreation planning, the town manager and I took a look at schedule and next steps to move forward. A comprehensive recreation plan, which is a recommendation of the town plan, and the planning commission is supposed to lead that. We decided to defer that to the next municipal planning grant cycle. We have plenty to do. we've been getting regular planning grants, we might not get one in this cycle. And there are other actions that, activities the state is doing that might help us prepare for doing it. So we thought that would be better to defer that. So we did not submit that grant, which would have had to go in, I think, yesterday. Remaining action items, and you see that I'm trying to give them a project association. And so reviewing definitions and draft zoning bylaws to make them clearer, yes, that's part of what's in process, and some of that has been done now. And under the Conservation Village Plan, we do have those activities underway, and we will hear from Vanessa today about that. I did, for number 3, under B, I did develop a town plan report for FY, no, I'm sorry, that's the wrong one. That's a status report for the select board on the town plan. I have not done that yet. But that I'm hoping to do this week for the presentation next week. There's still some outstanding minutes to do that earlier this year. Try to get to those. Have been working in budgeting item 5 with the town manager to identify and prioritize planning commission assisted projects, and looking out beyond just looking into FY27 at this point. And then ongoing tasks are housing. So much of what we need to do to advance the housing strategies comes back to the housing coordinator position and trying to find funding for that. And I'm working directly with the town manager about developing a scope for that, who we want to partner with, and how we approach for that. Energy facility siting, which is number 8 under remaining action items. I have not gotten back to Wyndham Regional to schedule that work. It would happen next spring, summer, so we have time. They know we want it, but I'm not teeing it up quite yet that we will do that. And the last item, energy facility siting, I did check back with Encore Energy 2 megawatt battery project. And they had planned to put in a petition for a certificate for public good with the Public Utility Commission back in May. They have not yet done that, but from what I understand, they plan to do that this month. And we're just preparing testimony for that purpose. So I've asked them to let me know when, and the select board and the town manager know when that is actually filed with the Public Utility Commission. And that relates back to, the energy facility siting number 8, and having an enhanced energy plan. If we have an enhanced energy plan that meets the criteria of the Public Service Department and their new criteria, we can have deferential status in any proceeding regarding the siting of any kind of energy facility in Putney, and that could be very important to us one day. So that's why developing an enhanced energy plan, we've talked about it in prior meetings, a lot of work has been done. So it's more packaging it up, updating some of the modeling, and importantly, developing energy facility siting criteria. That is something we haven't done. So that will be the thing we hope that Wyndham Regional will help us do. So that's the action item report. Any questions? I won't review my planning commission chair's report, but I do put them into your packet because they're very difficult to find otherwise. They're rolled up in the select board meeting packet. So I try to make it available for you that way for the public. Any questions? Otherwise, I'll move on to our next item. Questions or comments?
You're very busy.
It
It's
is
true.
very busy. Yes. So comprehensive village plan, let me turn to Vanessa to give an update.
Sure. So we're still in the recruiting process for the project advisory committee. I think that the it's in a couple of events. So there was the Walk Safe Putney audit event that we did a couple of Fridays ago. That was a good source for recruiting some new committee members, and was a fun and interesting event as well. So I enjoyed being a part of it and learned quite a lot. We're now thinking about 4 or 5 people that have been nominated. And I know that one of the goals that we had was to bring a list of potential nominations or committee members to this meeting for presentation to the planning commission, but we realized once we hit October 24th, which was the old deadline, that we only had one project advisory committee nominee. So we extended the deadline and are using this time to really kind of actively recruit more people, looking at the different kinds of areas of expertise and knowledge that we're looking for, to do some targeted outreach to different organizations and people who have supported the project, especially for the grant application, and otherwise in the community. So that's all to say that we're still looking for nominations, and we intend to bring a list of nominations to present to you in the December meeting. And then we'll be planning a project advisory committee kickoff in December 11th here. And the goal at that point will be to review an RFP and get buy-in for the project from the committee. So, yeah. Any questions? It seems like there's a little bit more awareness of the Comprehensive Village Plan project. At least we keep on talking about it, so that's, I think, what it takes.
Yeah, and we do have several nominations that have come in,
Yeah.
and some offers of help. We'll be meeting with the Wyndham Regional Commission later this month to get their thoughts on how to do a comprehensive village plan, their recommendations. I know that Chris Campany has some very specific suggestions for us, and they've already sent us some recommended consultants and some resources like that. And we've had a couple of other offers from statewide perspectives to help us with that. So I feel like we're making good progress, because we really do want to develop a good committee and have a good RFP. Yeah, good list of consultants. So thank you, Vanessa, for your leadership on this project.
Sure.
I just will note that if you wanted to suggest to anybody they nominate themselves or another person, the easiest way to direct people is to go to the town website, and under the news section, there's a news item about the nomination process.
Yeah.
And you click on that and you go there and you can come right to the nomination form, which is a Google form. It's very easy. So, and it links to other information.
Or reach out to me or Sue, and we can also send you the link to the form too.
Yeah.
And there are some QR codes posted around town, which are also.
Yeah, and I did even bring some with me. Anyways, more of those. Okay. Comments, questions? Otherwise, we'll move on to Putney Landing Sidewalk project. Which is just a little bit of a thing that, one idea of what happens in the comprehensive village plan. We hope to have the full sidewalk network looked at when we do the comprehensive village plan, but what is it, 3-4 years now, Pip, that we've been working on the Putney Landing Walkway project? A long time. And so we are now at the point of assisting the town manager, who is the project manager for project, to select a consultant, a design consultant, as the first stage of this. And I'll hand it over to Pip to give a little brief summary where we are.
The selection committee consisting of Sue Coakley, Bill Bannister, and Karen Astley met. And our goal was to review firms that were offering services that were pre-approved by the state, the Department of Transportation, for this program that we're involved in, this grant program. And our first step is to pick a firm who will offer project management services, municipal project management, we're obligated as a condition of our grant to do that. So that was our first step. And we reviewed firms who offered those services and selected one to begin negotiating with. And that's the status is. Karen, has the outreach gone out to that firm?
Hopefully this week, Pep.
Okay,
It has
good.
not, but it will, and I need to contact John Lemure with the state of Vermont.
Okay, I'm glad. I mean, I'm available to help. I know we sort of left it a little open at the end of our last meeting, but let me know if you want some help.
Yeah, I want to get it off my desk this week, so,
Yeah,
I'll check in.
okay,
that's-
thank you.
That's where we are. We're preparing to enter into a sort of state facilitated discussion with an engineering firm about the initial step, this municipal project management. That municipal project manager will probably give us some guidance about how to then move on to the next steps, selecting a design engineering firm.
thank you.
End of report.
Good, thank you. All right, that brings us to the zoning bylaw part of the project. And so our three items are to provide a status report and talk about issues for the bylaws update and subdivision regulations. We're doing this in stage 1 and stage 2 at this point. And so A is stage 1. These are the updates relative to housing, economic development, administrative, removing administrative barriers, making it easier for the process to work, complying with state law. And these are things that are largely non-controversial. People are just say, hurry up and get it done, because we'd like to have these improvements to the zoning. And so we'll talk about that. The second part is the forest block overlay, which is a stage 2. And then we'll circle back, talk about the schedule to be able to get things done. I just want to congratulate and thank Pip. It really came down to him to identify what changes we really needed to make to the zoning, and it's a very complex process. And he was able to deliver to me on Sunday a fairly complete version. There's some I's to dot, T's to cross, but I'm determined this week we're going to have a public review draft of the bylaws that we can be looking at for a couple of weeks. And the schedule we're headed towards having a set of bylaws that the commission can approve for public hearing. We were scheduled to do that in December, but I think we're not going to be able to do that. I think we'll be able to do that for our January meeting. Because we need enough time to go through this full draft of the bylaws. So the issues that we have been chewing on in particular have to do with looking at the updated current uses. Associated with that is looking at the dimensional requirements or density by district as well, and updating that. And then and the third, those are two big things associated. There's a lot wrapped up into that terminology. We've been making a number of changes. And so what you have in your packet, which I'm about to show on my screen here, for those of you. Oh,
I also shared it in the chat, so everyone should be able to access that. That's online.
Great. But before we dive into those details, I think we're close to being able to have something ready for hearing in January. That'll give us time to review with the attorney and the town manager and make sure that all the citations and everything are internally correct. And there's one item, one addition to it that we might do that gives us time possibly to consider. And that is that, well, a couple of other issues. Steep slopes, we'll talk about that tonight. And the possibility of integrating the subdivision regulations into the zoning bylaws. The attorney comments strongly recommended that we have really one set of regulations and that the subdivision regulations are really integrated in part of the zoning bylaws, which means that we would only have one set of definitions instead of two sets of definitions, among other efficiencies between the two documents. So
Subdivision is going to be part of the general bylaws
well, we're
rather than a separate piece. by
that's what we're
itself.
considering doing. We haven't decided. There had been the thought that it would be too hard to do. But honestly, I'm not entirely sure that making it another chapter and aligning the definitions within one definition section and a few other things like that, how difficult that would actually be. And the benefits in alignment with our goal of administrative ease would be great, because it is confusing to have two sets of regulations to have to work through. So that's not done, but that is something we're considering trying to get done. I wouldn't have that done by this Friday, but I could get prepared to have that ready, done by December. So those are the issues that we're still working through, and what Pip and I thought would be useful is to talk about some of the issues by reviewing this, what I call the quick reference tables that we've been adding to the regulations, the district use table, table, district dimensional standards, because that really summarizes a lot of what the decisions that have been made. Is an easier way to look at it. So I think we want to dive into that, but Pip, anything else you want to say as an introduction that I kind of cover
No,
the status?
let's get into it.
Okay. So let me pull up. Let me share my screen here. You're all able to see that? Okay. Karen, are you able to see it on your end? Okay, great. All right, I can just make this menu go away. That would be great. Okay. So I'll just start by saying something that's been added to section 330, which is the district use table that you've seen various versions of before. The idea to say something more about the table. So now when you read the table, you understand what the P's and the C's and PUDs and all of that. So a nice introduction, so the table actually is more readable. That wasn't there. And what you do see is in red is anything that is new. So for example, item 1, or what's called number 1, it was single family as a use. And you could see that it was permitted everywhere. It's still permitted, but we're calling it a one dwelling unit versus a single family. It used to be 2 family is a 2 dwelling unit use, or a 3 dwelling unit use, or multiple dwelling unit use. And there are different uses of that for the different districts, what's permitted, what's conditional. So that's a change. So you can see how red shows you what the new title is and you can see what it was. And the new thing also in there is cottage cluster. And so Pip, I'm gonna turn it over to you to talk about the questions that you've raised about that. Does anybody is everybody following where we are in this? I'm not. Okay, good.
As we were going through, we have done a couple of passes at imagining these uses, looking at what was permitted in the old regs and seeing if we want to do some modifications in the new regs, generally with an eye toward encouraging more housing opportunities. So that,
Leave it back, but I figured you were probably hungry by now.
Could you all mute yourselves? Thank you.
I just need to.
Yeah, thank you.
that brought in some questions for me. If you look at the 3 dwelling unit line, go over to resource and conservation. We could approve that as a conditional use, or it could be approved as a PRD. There's a little bit of work maybe to do in the regs to, it may be both a conditional use and a PRD. That isn't how the structure of our regs work right now. Is that the PRD is a planned development. It has its own unique review process. And I think need to consult with Mike at WRC about how to structure and make it clear to a reader that sort of both paths may be available to them. The concept behind the PRD is that it's a more rigorous review process, requires more information in submittal work on the part of the applicant, but it opens the door to allow for more creative planning than the dimensional constraints typically found in the regs for a zoning district. So that you could put dwelling units closer together than you might otherwise be allowed to, deal with some other modifications like that. The goal is to allow for more thoughtful development, sort of conservation style developments is kind of a buzzword for that idea of units more closely related to each other, perhaps sharing drives, that type of thing, leaving larger portion of the site undeveloped. So I just have some questions about how to structure that information in the regs to make it clear that those 2 paths are available, one being more rigorous, but offering more flexibility.
And the conditional, the conditional review, would that be done by the zoning administrator or?
No, conditional, oh, that's an excellent question. Why don't we look up above at B?
Yeah,
The C letter indicates a conditional use with review by the DRB through the zoning permit and conditional use review process. So
yeah,
if it's a C, the DRB,
the DRB, so.
and C is explicitly saying it's a conditional use, you must go through conditional use review process, which is in the regs and all supported by the state. The PRD is also a process supported by the state. It's a little bit different in its structure. So this, I may have some questions that I could answer for myself right now about whether conditional use is ever mentioned as a prerequisite for the plan development. But I'll discuss that with Mike and see. But to that end, I have included something that you didn't put into red, to the multiple dwellings line below
Oh,
cottage
yes.
clusters. This is trying to include in the table the requirements where this type of plan development can occur. And so it's kind of a use, but it's really not. It's a bigger deal than just saying it's a use. It's a process. It's a review process. And the end result is an area of land with this designation as a planned development. And in the eyes of some folks like the lawyers, it's essentially a zoning district unto itself, because you have now modified the requirements of the underlying district, and it now is a new thing. And they should be flagged for future reference so that additional development that affects those areas can be consistent with the conditions of the plan development, or revisit the DRB to have an amendment to the plan development. So I've included the three types of planned developments that we have in town. Planned residential use, which is obvious dwellings, planned educational development, which is the educational uses and often the attendant dormitories and support buildings, sometimes for housing, et cetera, often in excess of the minimum requirements for land area for dwelling units, et cetera. They need sort of an exemption. Or PUDs, which are planned unit developments in our definitions. They are structures that have both residences and commercial uses in the same structure. And so the first one we bump into here is below cottage clusters, and it's multiple dwellings with commercial or industrial uses. And I'm using some shorthand I invented, a unified plan with zoning flexibility to suggest to the reader what this is about. And then the initials PUD are planned unit development. Some of the other things in red reflect changes for state law about what types of childcare facilities are automatically required to be permitted in under zoning regulations. So that line of the small childcare reflects that. Conditional use for the larger childcare. Bed and breakfast will cover the Airbnb category. And it's being permitted in village residential, rural residential, and multiple use conditional in the other two districts. I'm gonna get into a messy technical one. At the bottom of page 2 of 5 is additional use. Additional use is a rename of what used to be called secondary uses. And the committee and Mike felt that it was beneficial to sort of rethink how we described more than one use. So it became messy. We used to have primary and secondary, and we thought that additional uses would be an easier way of describing that. The details of this are a little fussy. But it was a mechanism that allowed us, oh, yeah.
Could you give an example?
Yeah, let me,
I'll throw one out that was useful to me. It's like, when you do the cottage clusters, is one of those buildings the principal? No, they're all the same. So it's a use, it's a principal use, used to be principal structures. So this discussion, we had a long discussion about, does it matter which is a principal or secondary structure?
But those would
or
all be
use?
residential.
Right, it'll all be
versus-
residential. So we're just saying there are additional uses. You know, you could have other uses. You could have, we were using the example of residential and daycare, right?
Or the common room, the common building.
Yeah, a common building.
That had a kitchen, a commercial
Right.
kitchen or something.
That's right.
Is that what?
Yeah, it could be that, or it just, somebody has a office, on their property that's over the barn, which is another use, agricultural. Does it matter which is primary, which is secondary? It's just that they're an additional use. So just trying to change the language, kind of like moving away, is it a two-family house, or is it a 2-unit, 2-dwelling unit building, But trying to make it more flexible really is what we're trying to do, and simpler. So that's the idea. It's about uses.
And so then
And
the
other
idea is, sorry to interrupt,
Go
that
ahead.
if it's permitted in all the different districts, that then the additional use from, I assume, not be drastically different than whatever else the primary use of that development would be.
It's a good question. Depends on is the use allowed in that district? So back to my example of daycare, right?
Right.
So,
Like if you have, for example, a like a 1 or 2 unit dwelling, and then you wanna add, a bed and breakfast
Mhm.
building, but you live in resource.
Mhm,
Bed and breakfast is a conditional use in resource,
mhm,
even if a 1 or 2 unit dwelling is a permanent.
mhm.
I think in terms of the Conservation Commission's view of these different uses that are allowed in Conservation Commission sites,
Mhm.
the idea of having a 1-2 acre development block or development envelope where all of those houses or the entire daycare center would be
Mhm,
located
mhm.
was essential to thinking everything could be done. In other words, I think when we get around to Forest Block Overlay District discussions, that should be kept in mind, that this is a multitude of uses. Most towns do not allow these uses in conservation districts. I don't know about, we could do it with our very scattered conservation districts, limit those more
Mhm.
than the total forest block. But at any rate, we thought this was really a lot of uses that a forest block use, mainly for forestry and outdoor recreation, was
Mhm.
really expanding it. And the thing that made it, plausible was that whatever it was, it had 2 acres to do it on, and that was it.
Mhm. Mhm.
So I just put that out there at this point.
Mhm. That would suggest, Anne, if I'm listening to you, just looking at additional use, that rather than having that permitted in conservation, you would assume that be conditional, at least review. Yeah, so I'm just putting, because right now it's a P there.
Because there's nothing there right now. I mean, now within a conservation district, which is supposed to be dedicated mainly to forestry, forest, outdoor recreation, primitive camps, 1-family homes or 1-unit homes.
Mhm.
Suddenly there's a multitude of uses with no restrictions to any kind of development envelope that would protect the forest. So I think it becomes an issue because we're not doing how we're gonna protect the forest at this point in time.
Yeah, because
But in getting it to go together.
yeah, I mean, not much is changing.
No, but there's no, if someone came in and wanted to do, a daycare and, have, like maybe houses for people who worked at the daycare, I don't know what might come up. But there's no restriction on, or you'd want to do a planned unit development, there's no restriction that the planned unit development is contained within a 2 acre.
Yes, right.
Development envelope,
Mhm.
which really changes the ballgame.
Right, which is what Pip was talking about earlier, about the item on page 1, the multiple dwellings, the whole idea of the PUD, for example.
But this is, in terms of protection for forest, this is
Right.
certainly not in any other town that I know of so far.
Yeah.
Well, it just seems to me that allowing it to be permitted throughout allows a loophole
Mhm.
for somebody to apply for something that might not normally be permitted.
Mhm.
But then,
Yeah, it's a good point.
under the auspices of this, well, this other thing that I'm doing is permitted. And kind of thinking about the 2 acre envelope, I do agree that, just looking at the cottage cluster versus multiple dwelling units, I would want more definition there, especially. I mean, cottage cluster to me is a style of development versus just a number of units.
I
So,
think if we were to define it, I would like to see it have a cap.
well, I'm wondering if it even needs to be in there at all, or if it can be contained within the definition of multiple dwelling units.
Can I make a comment?
Yes. Good.
As a zoning administrator, I find cottage clusters, at this moment, especially if they're gonna be permitted by the ZA in potentially three districts, Um, to me, cottage clusters could mean that it could be a phased project over time. And I think it requires more review than from one person.
Mhm.
Is the Commons a cottage cluster?
Not in its classic sense at all, no.
Hmm.
No. I mean, that's, you could ask Adam Hubbard, but but in my knowledge as a designer, that wouldn't sort of fit the requirements of a cottage cluster.
Do we have definitions? of
I mean,
No, it needs to be defined, and I think among the things that would define it, what you're saying is good, and I'm listening, and we need to research this further. What Karen's saying is also good. The classic cottage cluster in my mind is this, teens and twenties design so common out west, where there's perhaps a larger house, the sort of mother house, and then smaller houses, often in a courtyard arrangement, creating a U around the larger house, but the dimensions are quite small, so that the footprint's small and the little houses surrounding sometimes the larger house, so you don't necessarily need the larger house, are pretty modest. So the overall footprint is small.
Well,
And I agree that maybe, maybe it is just a housing type, a solution, and why does it need anything
Well,
more than?
we were talking about it originally, something in addition to what you said, that goes to what Anne was talking about, is that it was really contained in a certain amount of land area, for one. Two, it would be shared utilities, so it would be a chance to share water, sewer, or septic, as well as road, access to electricity. So it just makes the overall footprint of that housing type really limited. You don't have 5 driveways, you don't have, 5 septic, 5, it's, you're trying to do it within an area more shared. The U that you're describing, Pip, is a way that those things could readily be shared between the houses, so that reduces the impact on the land and the amount of land needed to do things. So we were defining it earlier, it was really meant to be within I think it was a 2-acre number. Well, maybe it was smaller, I can't remember now, but something like that. But maybe so it goes to right now, this question here, define.
So then the goal of keeping the cottage cluster in there as a separate type of development would be to kind of encourage that kind of
That is right.
development
That is
in a
right,
more kind of conservation oriented
That's
sort of way versus a multiple dwelling units where people can develop whatever way they want.
that's right, it's to encourage it, and it was to try to have an easier review process because of that.
And Karen's comment is that if it's a P, a permitted use, then its review goes to
The zoning
the zoning
administrator.
administrator. And it's possible, Karen, that you would choose to kick the site plan review up to the development review board, which would always be an option under the site plan review. So that permitted uses, we're now trying to move where everybody files a site plan. So that Karen knows, sort of like, has a diagrammatic illustration of what the intention of the land development is, even if it's a permitted use or a single family residence. So there is an option in the site plan review reg that the zoning administrator can give it to the development review board. So it may be a case that if it's complex and the zoning administrator doesn't want to review a cottage cluster, the DRB could.
And against this issue Karen was raising about, it could be phased over time, so how do you make sure that,
Yeah, the phasing doesn't bother me too much, because we have some stuff in here, if it's,
okay,
there's a 2-year window for zoning permits, you need to come back and the zoning administrator can give you another year. If you need other changes, the DRB reviews it. If it's a phased project, the developer should be very clear about that at the beginning, and that would be established as, you know,
I think
their
that's fair.
statements or findings of fact, you know, the developer says, I'm going to do this over a 5-year period, and you choose to accept that or not accept it. So whether that's done by the zoning administrator or the DRB, it doesn't feel like it's a big issue to me. You just get the applicant to commit. But I guess there's the promotional, you know, we're advertising a use that we are saying is permitted right across the board. I think by saying we especially like this housing type, you know, because it provides for some density with a very small footprint. And I think that you would make that clear in the definitions. And I think I need to do a little bit of thinking here about the changes that we're proposing in language, because we're substituting the phrase additional uses to replace secondary use. And that's sort of what is reflected by this additional use line in here, because we still have a line for I think we'll have one for. Yeah, additional use is followed by accessory use. And I may need to create some examples of this, both to help me think through it with Mike and Sue's help, and also to share it a little bit. But the gist of it is that if you substitute secondary use for additional use, the proposed regs here would be, the difference would be that they were always allowed in conservation resource, rural residential, et cetera, those uses, but they were conditional uses. And the change here is that it's saying you can have one as a permitted use rather than as a conditional use. So, if it was always allowed, it always was a conditional use with the same set of concerns that you have now, that there aren't strict guidelines about what an appropriate type of development is in the conservation zoning district. So I hear you about that. I don't know where to go with it exactly. It's because it's related in many ways to the issues in the forest block overlay district reg.
It makes things complicated.
Yeah, it overlaps with that.
Or we could just write these where we have fewer uses in the conservation districts, because the conservation districts aren't, they're all forest and they're not that big.
What, our conservation zoning district is, you mean in terms of square footage?
No. There they are, they're the dark green.
Yeah, I mean, it's a significant, I didn't do math, it's a significant portion of Putney.
And
The
when you start to
issue,
think of it as a place where you can put quite a lot of housing.
well, this isn't
I like
necessarily a lot of
that.
housing, it's like,
Like a shed.
that
it's like a
additional
garage.
use could be a number of things, and they could be kind of low impact, but it would be probably something other than, it might be something other than housing, than dwelling.
Like
But
a shed.
but it would typically be something that, let's see that, you know,
You see if you have a definition, because when we were talking about this, accessory, what would be an accessory thing to a residential? Well, it would be a shed, it would be the garage.
Mhm.
It, you know,
the example in the old regs was
might be a pool.
renting the third floor of a primarily retail use building for dwelling purposes. Now, that's a little bit, you know, that's not an example that you would find in the
Conservation. district.
conservation.
No, but that gives us a sense.
Yeah, so that change in adding another use, it just becomes really, from a regulatory point of view, I think you want to have some flexibility to have more than one use. And if the
No, I
use
think
is a
that's fine.
dwelling, you know, then,
Mhm.
then that's, you know, absorb
Mhm.
the use quota for a parcel. So having, opening it up to additional uses. I think I just need to develop up these scenarios to test them a little bit, to
Yeah,
see
no,
whether
that seems
the
reasonable to
thinking
me.
associated with the change of language and loosening the regs. Because once again, this was more in the spirit of allowing more opportunities for development. I hear you that you're saying that there shouldn't be any development in conservation, or if it is, it should be very carefully restricted to something like a 2-acre development parcel. But we have already heard the significant feedback in the town about the ideas of having restrictions like that on land development on those lots in the conservation zoning
And you've
district.
also heard a lot of support for the concept that you worked out for the Forest Block Overlay District.
Yeah.
There was a lot of support for it. So I think we just need to listen to everyone and find out what the different issues are.
That's what we're planning to do.
And,
yeah.
But I don't
Exactly.
think we should sort of like say, well, the conservation area is just really wide open for permitted, development, I
I
think.
don't think we're saying.
And there are a lot
You
of
are kind of
things.
saying that.
I don't.
With the
think that.
additional use.
with
But I think
additional
that the
use.
Yeah, I
number
think
of
this is good
uses
feedback.
sort of
Yeah, no, it
becomes worrisome without a
Yeah,
limited
it
development.
is a change so that, we are going from conditional uses for the additional or secondary use to a permitted use in those 3 districts: conservation, resource, and rural residential. And I think we could do some rethinking about that, because that is a change from the structure that was
We were thinking
existing.
of before.
Yeah, different names and a different sort of intent, trying to take away this sense of primary and secondary uses and just have uses. Just evaluate them as a use, and can you have more than one use?
That makes sense.
So, but noted, and we'll discuss,
And look at that and see.
whether that change.
Is there language about whether or not the additional uses? I guess I don't know what kind of definitions there are for additional use, and language about maybe tying the additional use back to what that use normally would be permitted or conditional. If that makes sense.
Yeah, I hear you,
So
because it could be something already listed in this table here.
exactly, if it's
Right,
already
that's what
listed in
I'm
the
hearing you say,
table,
yeah.
and it's just for a matter of consistency. So we don't want it to be,
Yeah,
conditional in one district, but then if you file it under additional use, now it's permitted.
right. Yeah. It's just too vague.
Yeah.
It's also very hard with the secondary,
This table is so helpful.
Yeah, so cool.
Yeah, previously, the structure of that secondary use or multiple use was that, if it was a permitted use anywhere else, it's a permitted use here. If it's a conditional use, then it's a conditional use everywhere. That notion, which, this is like parsing what is a use, because they're all uses. And a permitted use might be an additional use, a conditional use might be an additional use, but now we're saying that additional uses are permitted uses. And you now need to evaluate whether the one you're proposing happens to be a conditional use. You're allowed to do it, but if so, you're gonna go through conditional use review. So it's like 2 layers of interrelated meaning.
yeah, and is
I
it
think it's
adding any
getting,
value?
I think it's
Is a good
getting a
question.
little messy, so, and it was messy before. And we tried to clean it up, and
Uh-huh.
we may not have gotten all the way there. But this is good, it's good to talk
That's
about
good,
it
yeah.
in public.
Thank you for your questions.
Yeah,
This
yeah.
is the new stuff.
Everywhere else, there's that very precise language that says, if it was a permitted use, and you are now considering it, adding it, it's still a permitted use. If it was a conditional use and you're gonna add it, it's a conditional use. So that type of language.
I think this makes very clear that we do need a set of definitions for Tip is just so facile knowing what he's talking about and being familiar with these regulations, but some of these terms, I don't know what's
and
going on.
what terms do you feel are not well?
Well, there's two different kinds of uses,
The
like
conditional and
examples,
permitted?
yeah.
I hope that the document gets into that really early. And I think I've added some language that tries early on to
To sort of-
explain that our permitting process is for, yeah, so I think I can go there pretty fast, but there's new language.
Oh, good. If you say you've done it, then
Um,
I just haven't read it, so.
So I think that's. I
So,
think
so
the
noted,
choice
and I
advised
can't get right
that-
into it,
Yeah, that's okay.
but yes, I felt the same way, that the structure of our regs isn't self-evident when you first look at it, and other towns have a much better organizational process. It was a really deep dive to restructure all of this stuff in significantly alternative ways. So all we've done is kind of take our structure and try to clean it up as best we can within the constraints.
And I've always loved the chart.
But,
I like it.
Yeah. So let's see if there's anything else in here.
You had some questions on a couple of items here, that were conditional question mark for resource district, for example, motor vehicle service stations and mobile home park. So I just want to make sure we get to your question list
So
that you put
motor
on the table.
let's, yeah.
I'm showing them up on the screen right now. Or I was trying to. There they are.
Did I have some questions? I don't show that.
Well, I just took it from your table that you had C question mark.
Yeah, let me get my table up. Yeah, okay.
This can make you dizzy.
Yeah, so garden farm supply nursery. Didn't know whether that should be a conditional use in resource and conservation. I think it was before, and that's why it got carried into here. But I wondered whether,
As opposed to not permitted.
it
Just
was,
not permitted, yeah.
no, it wasn't there before, and I don't think it needs to be there. It's sort of a typo. I would suggest that we could do without allowing those uses in
Okay.
conservation
Or resource.
or resource, yeah.
Okay, I would agree.
Okay.
Next one was,
Motor vehicle service station.
Yeah.
Which was proposed as a conditional use in resource. And, I don't think that should be there.
Yeah.
Vehicle service, yeah, so I would suggest that that doesn't belong there.
For motor vehicle service station.
Service station, yeah.
Yeah.
And then the mobile home park.
The mobile home park,
It's residential.
it's. This resource district is really kind of a transitional district. That, I think, if you show your map, I think, sort of unlike the conservation, unlike the green, it's that lighter shade surrounding all of the dark green. It isn't, well, there typically isn't that much of it. It happens to be a bunch right here, but that's sort of an anomaly.
It's just distance from road is how they get to.
Yeah, I just not sure it's an appropriate use.
Sometimes the resource is part of the forest and sometimes it's part of a farm. And sometimes it's like a house. So,
Yeah, it was from our old regs. Is we permitted motor vehicle service stations as a conditional use and resource. And it doesn't feel consistent with our sort of goals of the description
and
of
it's
that
farther
district.
back from the road, which makes it probably not economically too viable.
Yeah, Mobile home park. There's a lot of language, the state it controls what we can do to a certain extent. We are allowed to say where we think they're appropriate. We can't ever eliminate them from a town. You know, we must accommodate them, but we're welcome to say where. It's a significant housing type. I mean, it's, if there's anything related, you know, I'd think more of like cottage cluster, you know, they're typically, the typical model is they're quite close together. They may share services, like there may be a single solitary septic, you know, power into the site that then's broken up. So, in this case, I think it just might be too intense, you know, because unless we started to have mobile home park small, mobile home park medium, you know, mobile home park large, and define what we thought were appropriate limits, it doesn't feel like a type that is well suited there. So I would say that I think we should get rid of it, yeah. And it is a carryover. We did permit it as a conditional use before, but I don't think we need to at this point. That'd be my recommendation for mobile home park.
I got that down.
Okay.
You're doing it out of which?
Out of resource.
Out of resource.
Okay.
Yeah, light industry is the last one there. It's just, it's only permitted in the multi-use district.
And it's conditional. Yeah.
Yeah, it's conditional, and it doesn't have a good definition, so we just need a better definition. If we go back to well, I guess we'll get there. I'm zooming through, but do you,
Yeah.
anything?
That's fine.
Okay, let's go to the dimensional standards table. And, the additions here is that we typically didn't have a maximum lot coverage numbers. And so we've come up with some, we talked about this earlier. The 80% is based on me actually measuring using mapping tools what the coverage was for a number of lots in town. 80% was the highest that I could find, and it was reflected by rods. So Rods and Mobile had an 80% lot coverage, and you know, that's a lot. So, but with multiple dwellings being allowed, it's a number that we could try out and see how it goes. Drop it down to 60, which is sort of across the board, 60% for the village and village residential. If you go over to multiple use used to be a 2-acre zoning district. And I'm proposing that it's much more like village residential in its sort of the way it's been developed, which is a 1-acre minimum lot size. And sewer and water are sort of as available there as they are in the village residential area. The landmark is right there. The mobile home park is served by sewer and water, which is in that same area. So I would suggest that we drop the minimum lot size down to 1 acre, kind of make it a clone of village residential. I bumped it up a little bit in terms of the front setback to be a little bit more than village residential. It was somewhat of an arbitrary call. I'm not sure it makes a whole lot of difference. There isn't that same feel that you get in the village residential with this street line.
We've got a question.
Okay,
Karen?
This might be a premature question because we haven't really got to it yet, but setback max. When you get there, can you explain that, Pip?
yeah,
I may have
This-
further questions.
yeah. So this is a design concept intended to prevent developers in the village from building further back than 25 feet from the property line. Now, this is somewhat controversial, and it's sort of associated with intentional designs incorporating traditional housing types. buildings close to the sidewalk, often with the front porch or the entry on the sidewalk so that there's activity there in the front portion of the house. It's the model for most of what got developed in the village center already, is that those buildings were located relatively close to the street, not all of them. And so it's a model, it was recommended by the state and by housing consultants to replicate that model. I don't mind talking about it and hearing some feedback if it felt like it was a constraint that prevented a thoughtful and intentional design development in the village, that sort of forcing housing up close to the street might not be desired by everyone. I could hear that. Cause I'm a little ambivalent about it.
Yeah.
We grabbed it from,
And we talked about, and I don't know how to call it, the big house across from the post office area that's set way back.
The Catalpa house.
yeah,
Catalpa, thank you. You know, that setback looks right for that situation.
Yeah.
You know, it works well.
Yeah, yeah.
And it works well in the village, you know,
Yeah.
so that would be an exemption or something, you know, to try to do
yeah,
that.
and I mean, the pros and cons of it, I think, that if the model were, if we had more buildings following that model, and it felt really inconsistent not to continue it, you know, would be like a gap in the teeth, and suddenly there's a house out of that. You know, maybe there's a rationale for that, but I think it's something that we could talk about and reconsider. You know, I'm not 100% sold on it, because it is associated with very intentional reproduction of historic housing models with the intent of capturing some of the feel and ambiance and the assumed sociability of that housing type and that era. I'm not sure that it all is consistent, you know, with the way the past really worked.
And we also know from Route 5 that people didn't really want their house right on the road, but the road was widened. And then the sidewalk was put in, and now they, you know,
Yeah,
they're
their living
right
room
there.
is the side, right
Yeah.
next to the
And
sidewalk.
so I don't, sometimes that's what happens. And also if you allow setbacks here and there, you might be able to have some trees here and there
And
too.
not to
And
mention
parking.
bike lanes.
And a
Mhm.
bike lane would be lovely.
Well,
Just-
all of that is out, well, at least the bike lane would be outside of the property line. So,
Right.
you know,
So the-
closer or further,
the front
you're
room
not
lane
gonna-
Has so much room.
Yeah. But
Yeah,
there's no
yeah,
place
but
for
that's in
trees
the public realm, yeah, and
And
the trees, what?
Just allowing a larger setback means that.
Yeah, no, I'm
more
totally I'm kind of leaning in that way from the beginning.
Allowance with the
yeah.
lot design.
Yeah,
You know,
in
so
which
it's
case
like
we
about
just,
parking and-
Village trees.
yeah,
Yeah.
but you'll find this concept of a minimum setback occurring many times in zoning intended to encourage denser.
Denser and walkable, you know,
Yeah.
like making it easy for people to have a way to walk
Yeah.
along a way. But how does that fit for Putney is the question. Is it something that would be more associated with the plan development kind of thing where you would wanna have the setback be appropriate to the 6 houses or?
Yeah, and it could be,
Could that be a waiver request if
Yeah.
there were a very
Yeah.
innovative design that required you to be closer?
yeah, or we just don't include it.
Yeah.
And we haven't had it before, it's a new concept, so we haven't had it before.
Didn't make that new.
Yep, no, it's a new one. Okay, so noted. Side setbacks, I don't think they haven't changed much, rear setbacks likewise, height likewise. Maximum density, dwelling density per acre, I think we've already talked about this. It was implied if you went through and did the exercise in that zoning district to find out the most houses that were permitted in that district, and then did the math to figure out what the minimum lot size to get that number of houses would be. I've kind of done the math. And so it is now here as a number. I think it just facilitates an understanding about the maximum possible density that might occur in that zoning district. I think it's pretty unlikely that you would see lot after lot after lot developed at that density. It just isn't the model that we have. You know, we have a model of a green surround of a house sort of located central on a lot that typically are bigger than the minimum required to get that 12 dwelling units. But it's there. It also establishes a number for the bigger developments, because the bigger developments, when they come through the planned residential development process, like our new
Wyndham
name.
Windsor Housing.
Yeah, what's the name? It's
Alupoway Drive. Didn't get too
Thank-
creative with it.
Thank you, yeah. There was an upper limit for the density for that, which then it translates into the lot area required to sort of provide the land needed per dwelling unit, the calculation. So it's useful in that regard. It establishes the limit that is then becomes the reference in planned residential development.
I would, yeah.
Yeah.
There are other ways of doing that in the conservation area that other towns have done, which I can pass on at some point. Don't need to do it now.
Of determining density.
Yeah, Shrewsbury just had in the conservation district, they can buy their, pretty much their 10-acre lots with their 25, with their, conservation lots. In other words, they did a combination, they combine their resource with their conservation areas, and they would buy, saying that there could be one house per 25 acres. They did their density that way. And we have 27 acres, so you can have your 2-acre development lot and then still get into current use. And
Right.
so when they combined some existing 10-acre lots with the 27-acre lots, ended up with one house per 25 acres, which is.
Well, we're proposing that in
It's sort of the same
conservation,
thing, it's just a different way of looking at it.
well, we're saying you could have 3 dwelling units as a conditional use or PRD in conservation. That's what we're proposing. 3 dwelling units in the conservation zoning district would be a conditional, you could do it as a
For the
conditional.
in the 27 acres.
Yeah,
Within the 27 acres?
yes, yeah, within the minimum lot size. I mean, I guess if you were on a smaller lot and you happen to be a pre-existing lot in the conservation zoning district, you would be permitted to, you would be afforded the same rights as a lot of the appropriate size. So there may be some undersized lots, I haven't done any research, in conservation, pre-existing. And those pre-existing lots have the same rights as.
No, I hear what you're saying.
Yeah, so we're proposing that 3 dwelling units would be, in both resource and conservation, would be a conditional or permitted use.
3 dwelling, I don't know.
Yeah.
It seems like a high.
It could be a
Well, I think
duplex.
as you say, and it depends on how you do it.
Yeah, duplex and
If
another.
they're all together along the edge of an existing road,
If it's-
that's
Now
that's
we get
different.
back
If
to
it's a
the
PRD, then.
Development envelope, do whatever you want with it, and then leave the rest
Yeah.
alone. Okay,
You brought up an issue that we've sort of talked about briefly, which is that do we need to have a set of design constraints associated with the approval of conditional or PRDs in resource and conservation? And so, I don't know the answer to that, and it's possible, but I think that as soon as we begin to establish significant constraints, we're going to run into the same backlash that we felt with the forest overlay block districts. And that it will require significant research and some PR to get that all to work in the time frame that we've established.
well, we have a lot of towns who've done these things, and people in those towns very much like the idea that they would be living next to quite a bit of conserved forest, we'll just have to see how it goes.
Yeah, we will. I mean, this conversation is going to
But
happen.
definitely,
Mhm.
you know, it's like you're correct, if someone's already has a pre-existing line in conservation and no land outside of the conservation district to put a house on, then that's that, they have to be able to build something.
Yeah, yeah, again. I think we'll come, not everybody who lives in conservation land wants to build it to the max. There's
No,
very,
absolutely.
very few people do, as a matter of fact.
I think it would reduce their property value big time too.
Well, and they don't want it. I mean, I
Yeah.
think, and you actually made the wonderful comment, and at the September meeting, that to remember that many of the people who live in the resource and conservation areas have been great supporters of trying to do land conservation and habitat protection and all of that. And
They have, yeah.
I think that's really true. And it's also true that anybody can buy a piece of property anytime and wouldn't have that ethic, right? And so we live with this duality of people who say, but we are mindful. And then the reality that land can be sold, and somebody who buys
It's
it.
the older
would-
residents who have that mentality because they are attached to the land, they've lived on it.
That's right.
And they
So-
know it, and then, you know, when you pass it on to the son who lives in California, it's a different story.
Who might just sell it to somebody.
It has been done.
Of course, and it probably will happen again. So that's the conversation.
It's a
we're gonna
kind of
have.
balance that. we
That's the
have to talk about.
conversation we need to have, and what are the best ways to, what already protects land, and what are the gaps? You know, like where does that not work, right? Where are the risk places? And that's important, it's a good conversation to have. But it got framed that way, you know, in our last meeting, saying, all right, well, we already have some, how do you know those regs don't work? Because we don't have any development here. Like, well, that doesn't mean there isn't any risk. You know, so let's talk about that. Analysis is a good one. How far do the current regs go and what do they do? Okay, that's good, you know, but I think we're gonna take the forest block on separately here. We're just trying to, you know, maintain, I think, the conservation area. We've had some good comments here about things we shouldn't do.
Okay,
Thank you.
we'll look at it. That's right.
And have one more thing on this max dwelling density per acre. You calculated this, so this is an implied max dwelling density per acre. Did you, in putting it in the table, is this meant to be, this is established
Yeah,
max density, or is it, do you want to reference it? And it's part of the reason I put it in italics, is I wasn't sure if you wanted to show it as something implied, or that is a regulation. And
it becomes a regulatory
because it's implied.
number. Because you would, yeah, if I did my math right, and I just made a note to myself to check it, then this is where you would end up
Mhm.
trying to maximize the development possibility, acknowledging the square footage required, you know, in that zoning
Right,
district.
so if you were a zoning administrator, just to play it back, that if you found that somebody had a density above any of these in a particular area, they could say, this can't be approved.
Right,
I mean, this is another way of backing into it. Where you
Yeah,
can
I mean,
follow the density, the dimensional standards.
Mhm.
But the other thing is, you could also just say, if you wind up with, you know, more than 4 dwelling units per acre, in village without sewer, water, you know, doesn't work, you know, and
right, it would be an easy way to test it.
an easy way to test it,
Yeah,
okay. I
the,
just want to be clear,
the
when this
less-
goes in, what is the implication
Right,
of
the
this?
less
It's really
obscure-
meant to be a requirement. It's a,
yeah, it is a requirement because it's referenced in the PRDs that
Yes.
the base density of that zoning district is your starting point for any discussion about a
Okay.
PRD. But, you know, the assumption is in conservation that the max you're going to see is 3 dwelling units. So, I just will go back and check my math and see whether 3 dwelling units comes out to 0.08 dwelling unit per acre when you have 27.5. it doesn't seem like the number.
Doesn't seem like the right number. I just have the math doesn't
Now
work
in
in
the
my head.
27
Yeah.
acre
Yeah.
lots required.
Yeah, so I will do some checking about my math.
Okay,
I
okay.
feel a little more confident about the ones in the village and village residential.
Yeah.
Good.
Did you have any other question about this, Karen? You asked a question a little bit about. Well, I guess that was more about max setback.
Yeah, but the max dwelling too, like Pip just said, you know, I'm looking at resource and it's 0.6, right?
Yeah, I'm
Dwelling
gonna do math.
per acre?
Dwelling unit per acre, yes, half a
Okay.
dwelling unit per acre.
Yeah. So,
Yeah.
yeah, I like 0.6. I'm like, what is that?
Yeah,
It's like, is
let
it
me
just, can I
yeah.
round up?
Yeah. Good
What's a
point.
0.6,
Yeah.
you know?
Let me do some math. I feel very. and
It's
I'm able
okay,
to-
but that's a lot of work right there, Pep, and thank you for doing all of this. This is
Yeah, I'll
like,
just go back over my work and just check it.
Okay.
But conceptually, it's pretty easy to do. I just may not have done my math, my ratios right. A thought that is, I think it's possible to go back in, and especially in conservation and resource, to work on the description of the parcel to include some specific references about the goals of future development in those parcels to make the language stronger. And it's an easy place to do that. It then sets the stage so that conditional uses in the conditional use review, you reference the description of the district. Is typically done through the town plan, but I think it's entirely appropriate to find language in this is section 320.1 where we describe each district. So I think that's something that we could amend, add some of that language in there to establish a
Provide
little
some guidance.
clearer what the development guidelines expectations are in those two districts, you know, which have.
Every district starts out with the purpose of the district.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, I mean,
All right, and we have a couple of questions
Okay.
here.
So Karen was first.
Yeah, Karen?
all right, when you're looking at your map too, so the lot width. Oh, never mind. I was looking for frontage. Never mind. Taking my hand down. Yeah, don't worry about it.
All right, Doug?
Thanks for bringing up this max dwelling, Sue. I've been waiting for the opportunity to raise my hand, but I can't get it to raise my hand. Finally, I figured it out. I don't even know what I did. So I'm looking at the 12 units per acre. I have 0.8. I can't imagine putting 3 fourplexes on my property. I'm thinking of the Putney Commons where Elizabeth Christie lives down there. They've got like 9 units on 4 acres. That's 2 units per acre. I'm wondering what it would look like if we had 12. What would that look like? I mean, 4 duplexes, 4 triplexes on my property would be absurd. I think that's my opinion. And where do you have room to do that anyway? I think that's,
Like Alice
It
Hallway.
looks like Alice Hallway.
Looks like Alice Hallway,
Yeah,
because it's multi-story.
right.
I think
I didn't
we're-
hear that, Ann. I didn't hear that. Ann, you said Alice Hallway?
Yeah, the new housing development, going up on Alice Hallway Drive.
Oh, well, that's 25 per acre, isn't it? Can you imagine doing that all the way down Main Street?
No, I think what we're trying to say, this is a maximum. It's what's
Okay.
implied by the setback requirements. When you add height and, front setback and lot coverage, all of that, you wind up saying, well, what you could do would be 12 dwelling units per acre.
It doesn't mean that
So
that's what it has to. Yes.
It just means that's the
So what
max.
what this is saying is I could build a Motel 6 on my property as long as it meets that criteria, right?
If you could figure out a site plan that was acceptable, then the density is not really the constraint. You know, your site is incredibly constrained because of the
Right.
slope and access and frontage and all the rest, but, you know, what form the housing takes is quite variable. So 12 small single-family residential buildings on an acre is gonna be pretty dense and probably
That
not
does not
appropriate.
work. Does
Yeah,
not work. I mean,
but three, you know, three plexes or three fourplexes, or two buildings that have 6 units each, that begins to be reasonable when you think about the built result of that.
I want to do a time check. We're at 8:15, and you know me, we're gonna be done by 8:30. So this is a great conversation. I mean, and you can see how we have spent hours in rooms talking about these things, and Pip has spent even more time working at his desk, thinking about this. But I want to ask Pip, well, first of all, anybody have any other questions about this table, the district dimensional standards? This has been a good conversation where we come away wondering if we need the max setback at all. So maybe that doesn't survive. Beyond this, we'll give that some more thought. Think further about how we make sure the math works on max dwelling. And be clear that we talk about what it means, right? We can't just put it in the table. It needs to be explained somewhere what that is and how it's used. So that's something we can take away from this conversation. We also heard appreciation for the table. Anything else about this? Otherwise, there's one other table that I want to show that I think is mostly not controversial, but you never know. I think I'm moving on. So here, for once, I'm showing you what the change would be in the off-street parking requirements. So you see that some things have gone away. There used to be 9, there's only 8 now. And they're talked about in a more broad way, inclusive way. For example, all assembly uses, it's 1 space per 5 installed seats versus 4. So we're trying to allow for more dense parking there. Not a lot has changed other than to remove some things. Well, retail is simpler, it's retail uses, and there's just one dimension for that. We added medical offices and other offices because they had different kinds of needs. And having a space per number of square feet is not unusual for these uses, which is why it is like that. Of course, we hear the question, and where's that off-street parking to be found? That's a good question. And that's part of why a comprehensive village plan is needed that would allow us to identify places for where off-street parking could be. But I just wanted to put this up. I think this is fairly non-controversial, but I never know until we put it up. And any comments or suggestions from any of you about this? Okay. We did not get into steep slopes yet. That's another big topic, and I wonder if you want to take just a couple of minutes, just say where we are. We're not done with it, but the challenge of it and what are some of our guidelines for how we're trying to come at it.
The comments from Adam Hubbard. I don't know how many of you have been at a meeting where Adam discussed his concerns about regulations addressing development on steep slopes, but he's a licensed landscape architect and he feels that it's inappropriate to single out slopes that some regs do that are 15, 20, 25%, that they're easily developed and there aren't that many issues associated with that. He just jumped back in. He's been out of town for several weeks, I think out of the country for several weeks. And I just heard from him today. The issues that he's brought up are that he thinks that the concerns aren't necessarily warranted. That mapping is very challenging because he's been trying to get some definitive slope mapping for a project in Brattleboro and has found conflicts between the available mapping. So it's another one of these, how do you determine what is the percentage of slope that you might have your reg be triggered by, which is challenging because the zoning administrator doesn't really have any expertise, not in no way a criticism of Karen, but just as the development review board doesn't have any expertise in determining slope with any degree of accuracy. So it becomes a mapping issue. There are best practices that we've included in a reg that I'm sort of working on. I'm throwing out the suggested language to Adam and to some other people for some review. It primarily just says use best practices as outlined by the state, and there's a document that they provide with erosion control recommendations. And that may be an appropriate place to leave it. We had a discussion about whether the town has any liability in the event that development was approved and there were consequences. I think that if you reference the best practices, then you've told the applicant that this is what the state wants to see, follow it, and it's not our responsibility if there are consequences because of poor practice on the site. Also, it becomes significant. We're dealing with stuff all below the threshold of state permitting. As soon as you get into a big project, and I think the threshold Adam shared it with me is, well, I don't want to say it. It's something in terms of acreage, rather low acreage, or maybe even a portion of an acreage. The state kicks in with stormwater discharge permitting and a whole set of erosion control requirements for any of the big projects. So anything that we saw that was significant would probably trigger those state requirements. Yeah. Likewise with impervious surfaces, significant areas of paving, etc. You can only go so far before you trigger a state permitting process. So I'm not that concerned about the level that would come under our scrutiny. And because we don't have any expertise, I think we have to it's just as dangerous for us to be creating a law and requiring adherence to it and then be taken to court and sued for unenforceable law or one that was poorly enforced.
Have you heard of towns that's happened to that have these regulations about steep slopes?
No, I haven't. But I haven't
people.
researched it either.
Nor have I.
Yeah.
Rod Francis, who was the consultant for the town plan, put a 20% slope off limits. And I just wondered what his reasoning was behind that.
From Adam's perspective, it's really arbitrary. And Adam feels, I mean, I'm sort of speaking, Adam Hubbard. You know,
Yeah, I know, I was here when you spoke last time.
Yeah.
And
it varies from regulation to regulation, 15%, 20, 25%, 30%.
It's all over the map.
Yeah, you can find model regs that feel as though there's a threshold, and those thresholds vary significantly from 15 to 30%.
Well, you've got the problem of how do you measure what is a slope, first of all, and then secondly, what is required based on that slope, and it partly depends on the acreage and the area around. There are so many dimensions to this. The more we looked into it, we realized that it's really best to rely on the state best practices guidance, understand where state law would kick in and require a permit anyway. But what can we as a town actually know and do, about this is a really important question. So if we're referencing the best practices the state has out there, and that's used in their permitting, and that kind of thing. That probably is good enough for us, and that they're required to meet it. We always have the question of how do we make sure things are enforced, right? Was it actually built based on what was an approved design or site design? Those are tougher questions for any issue, not just that one. But where we find ourselves leaning is we can't do better than the state guidance, which is what you would have to go by if you had to get a permit anyway. And require them to follow that. Can we demonstrate, as in any aspect of building code or so forth, that they've required they demonstrate it? That's not a strong point for Vermont. And we don't have a strong inspection capability for that. So we still think referencing the state requirements makes sense. We're talking to Brattleboro about how they're doing it. We're in that conversation with them. You know, to try to,
Brattleboro is already built all over steep slopes. Is there a better?
well, they have, yeah, that's,
From years, you know, from
yeah,
ancient history.
yes, yeah, you certainly see
Yeah.
steep, yeah, and you can see that you can build on steep slopes
And,
there.
and as Andrew was saying at the same meeting that, Adam spoke at, that he already sees some of those buildings in trouble.
Yeah.
And steep, when we're talking very steep slopes for sure in Brattleboro. I mean,
Yeah, and some of those are very old
Definitely
buildings,
down
and who knows what they used, when they did that, but
Yeah.
again, we would think that state best practices, which would tell you how to define slope, you know, what you have to do, in different conditions of slope and acreage, as it relates to water, stormwater discharge, so that's just a big picture.
But what about erosion? Doesn't the state?
Yeah, the state
stormwater
also goes after it.
discharge.
It's stormwater and erosion. They're sort of all part of the same discussion.
Then I think it would be good to look at the state reg. I assume you have already.
And that's what we're embracing. And rather than putting the state regs into our actual document, we reference the state regs because the regs change everything.
You can put them into your document, but are they really complicated?
Oh, yeah. 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 It's a big deal, and they're changing all I mean, they, you know, with the flooding that we have and the new kind of weather
I
that
was
we
gonna
have.
say, this idea of building on steep slopes, given the changing climate seems slightly foolhardy to me.
Well, yeah, I mean, I think anybody runs a risk if, you know, they are on a steep slope or close to water, or would people do both? But the question is, what do we do in our regulations? We're not in a position to implement anything greater than what the state has, for one.
Well, and
Actually, you can.
putting
We
on,
can, but no, it's the capacity to do it. How are we gonna do it?
We don't have an expert in that field. And if the state dictates this, then we can follow what they have instead of trying to set up our own.
Well, they have standards,
Yeah.
now they don't dictate in
Or
other
not
cases.
dictated,
Yeah,
but yeah.
but that's right. I mean, the idea is to reference what they call best practice.
And if they update their best practice to say you shouldn't build on steep slopes, then we will also have that updated.
Yeah.
We will reference that.
It's a question of how to build on a slope, like what's required.
Again, let's have the development envelope in these forest blocks and we won't even have the discussion.
Well, the steep slopes are not just in the forest block, they're
No, I
in the
know,
village.
I understand. You can go with those regulations, you know, in places that can be built on outside, you know. Yeah, but again, it's easier just to say you gotta leave, there's a big chunk of forest and just don't do anything.
Yes,
Whether
well,
it's whether it's
that's
flat or a steep slope.
a bigger, you know, it's a bigger issue overall, and we agree, and it needs to be dealt with well.
So we have a section 508
And now it's
erosion,
8:30.
erosion control that we could take a look at, and, you know, when these new regs get posted. I think it's the same.
It's probably the same as it was before. We had a long discussion about this, not knowing what that meant.
Okay, I'm gonna do a time check here. It's 8:30.
I've gotta go,
We all do.
yeah.
And I wanna be able to wrap this conversation up. You can see that there's still important conversations we're having, but we're landing on it. And you're getting a sense of how and it's good to have this conversation. We're gonna put it all into the bylaws and bring it to you, and there'll still be, I'm sure, some topics to talk about at the December 2nd meeting. But I'm anxious to try to get the document in your hands so you can see what it all is. And I'm sure even to the last minute, there'll be comments and questions about what could be different, but we're gonna try to make it sound and work together as a document, as an overall body of regulation. And I mentioned that, the extra credit would be to put the subdivision regulations into it to be what I now know is called a unified code. I heard that we wanted to do a unified code. I didn't even know what that was, and now I understand we don't have separate sets of land use regulations. You have one set.
Yeah.
So for example, the cell tower regulations and the flood hazard regulations, they're all already integrated into our zoning
Yeah.
bylaws, just not subdivision. So,
Yeah. Some subdivision, read like, they're really intense, they really repeat other parts of the zoning sections.
Yeah.
Verbatim almost.
Yeah, some of them are
Subdivision,
very-
because once you've got a lot created,
Yeah.
the flexibility of making it conform to the other regulations is
Mhm.
pretty much gone.
yeah,
So to me, that recommendation of the attorney was a good one.
yeah, I think it makes sense. It's more just time but I think if we're getting close, we're down to just sort of a few things to make final decisions about, then taking time to add that in could be worthwhile. So that was the other one that was on the table, is to do that.
Well, all we have to do is. And we'll get our regulation.
All right.
Yeah.
So Pip, is there anything else you want? I really want to wrap the meeting here. Is there anything important you wanted to ask here before we
there's a-
adjourn?
There's a new discussion of fences. There has been some change in the general performance standards related to storm flows and that I'd like to review. I mean, it's
Yeah.
one of these things that it got changed. We haven't had a chance to talk about it.
Okay.
So that's 506J. I'd like to just put on our list of things to discuss.
So we will, Pip and I continue to meet and sometimes with the regional, they'll do this while we still have some of their time to look through this.
I just want to thank both of you for doing this work. I know that it has been a lot of work and that it has been, I think, more work than you planned on taking on. So I just wanted to let you know that I really appreciate how thoughtful both of you have been with this project.
Well, thank
I
you.
will second
I've learned a lot.
Yeah, it is challenging. It's challenging because we have high expectations and no staff, no ability to do anything. This is all so regulatory in its nature, yet, we don't have mechanisms, except these very simplified review processes and, the expectation that there hasn't been a long history of gruesome development, there've been the mistakes, but so, it's hard to be a town our size, sort of this in-between size, that we don't have the money to pay for stuff. And if you took a look at Brattleboro's multi-page section about erosion control and stormwater discharge, it's a very impressive set of regs. I think it's about a dozen pages in their overall thing and has a significant amount of regulatory review and expertise associated with it. Great for Brattleboro, too bad for Putney. Because I've been looking at these model regs from various communities, trying to get a sense of what's an appropriate response for Putney. And Brattleboro is this bar that's just incredibly high.
Right.
Very beautifully done regs, but also with an expectation there is a multi-person zoning office there,
We should look at towns like ourselves, yeah, because we'll never make that.
Yeah, so it's trying to say the words, enforce them as best as we can,
Yeah.
You know, and,
Well, if they're on the books, they're enforceable partly by liability, because it's now
Yeah.
the property owner, builder, developer, you know, to meet the requirements.
Yeah.
We can't always make sure they do. We
Mhm.
try our best.
Mhm.
Let me just say the stage 2 project, the forest block. This is, probably will just make perfect sense to everybody, is we're gonna park that until we're done with stage 1. Because we need to get this part done and out the door. I really want a January hearing on these. The feedback that we received at the meeting on the 14th and the 30th, and all the other feedback, the focus group, all of the feedback suggests that we really do have a significant undertaking, you know, to take that on, to make sure we have a aligned understanding about what the risks and needs are. And that we have good policies that will meet those needs, that we understand what current policies do and what they don't do, to address the risks that we face. And that we find resources, significant resources. I would say the state should have stepped up a long time ago, and they haven't, to really help with this issue of forest block and habitat protection. And I would like them to start working with Putney and other communities, but there's another one who wants to do it, to really help us look at the options, look at current policy, state policy, local policy. What does it do? What does it not do? What are the options that we have to make sure that the risks that are real are addressed? Not everybody's looking at the risks. I think we are right here. And that we have a way to get an impact analysis to understand what are the costs and benefits of the policies that we want to enact. And I think, while some communities have done this work, I haven't seen this level of analysis. Maybe you know of it, Anne, yet, but I think that we should seriously take it on. Not only because it's the right thing for Putney, but I think it could be a good model for other communities, frankly. And if we can get this,
Other communities have done quite a bit so far. We have found none that have been sued
yeah,
over protecting their forests or having regulations that reduce forest fragmentation.
yeah. And I think
So we might check with them how they.
we have to learn from
process
all of
that.
that. So anyway, I don't think we can do anything on that really until January, February.
But then you will have to sort of, since everything's gonna be integrated, you will have to have some changes that go with it through the body of the zoning to make it coordinated, like the subdivision regulation.
Oh, it absolutely will have to be. We just, that's what stage 2 will
But we
be.
wanna get the housing stuff.
We need to get that done, and the improvements and administrative, and Pip just said it, volunteer staff. We're doing the best we can, but we can't do more than we can do.
No, it's fun.
Let's do this well. Let's do stage 1 well. I really want to try to get us that we have a hearing draft approved at our January meeting. That's my goal right now. It was supposed to be December. We can't do that. But we can do January, I think. Get a hearing in January and move it on to the select board. And then we can dig into how we're gonna do stage 2. While we're getting comprehensive village plan up and running, Putney Landing walkway getting built, you know. There's a few things that will need our attention, but it's a top priority, and it just means that we're gonna. And we have to find resources. I don't think it's something we can just do on our own. But if we had a good model for Putney in terms of how to do this study and how to look at the impact, that would help a lot of other communities do it too. Yes. And I hope others would join us in doing it. We'll see. And Ann, I'll be happy to have a conversation with you about how we talk to the state about that. Very good. Yeah, not now. We want to wrap it
That
up,
sounds good.
but I do want to talk about that. So the commitment is there. There's just only so many hours in the day. Can't do it this nimble. So. for next
The
month.
animals can't sue, they just get. This is,
We understand.
and when they die,
And people in the houses. So,
and there will not be clean water, there won't, you know.
we
You
understand.
have a house and you're still gonna go down the drain with, if you don't protect what protects you.
We get it, we're
We can get
connected.
along together, but there has to be some ability to the environmental side of it, the benefits of it. And
Amen.
that if we don't understand that we live with these other animals,
Yes.
and we all have to get along, and not one of them is gonna sue because they can't, build their bear den there anymore.
We have to do it well. If we do something that isn't thoughtful, we wind up in court for 3 years or 5 years, that happens here in Putney. Then we're set back. I'd rather do something
I
that.
agree, and I actually thought that Tiffany, Andrew, and you had done really a very good job on the Forest Block overlay district, and I'm disappointed that, it was so concisely clear and simple.
Yeah.
And understandable,
Well,
and everybody got to build the same number of houses they would have been able to build anyway. It didn't seem onerous to me. And, anyway,
those ideas are still there. They're not gone. We just need more time for them.
okay, we may need to tweak some of these other things in the interim, because it's way behind this schedule.
Yeah. Okay, well, I'm going to adjourn this meeting. Thank you, everybody. Our next meeting is December 2nd here at the library. Thank you all for participating tonight.
Take care.
Thank you, everybody.
Thanks for
Good night,
listening.
everyone.
Good night.
Good night.